Welcome to our Waldner Academy. We have over 300 registrations today. Thanks a lot that so many people are interested in this topic. My name is Alexander Biller, and I'm looking forward to share a lot of inspiration with you. Our topic today, Innovation Center, key factors for future-oriented research spaces. Innovation Center all around the globe are the breeding and ground for science and collaboration, where small and big business develop tomorrow's solutions. But what factors make those ecosystems that attractive, that innovative? How can building structures and concepts support that vision? Our experts will deep dive into their projects, share with us their implementation experience, and explain how and why they designed these amazing spaces. And we have fantastic speaker today. Impulse number one is about what are the key factors for more success. From Simon Murphy, he's project manager of the brand new Henkel Inspiration Center in Düsseldorf, Germany. And Simon is an R&D facility expert developing infrastructure and processes to ensure its efficient operation. Simon, it's an honor that you are here to share your project with us. Impulse number two is about why do we need other spaces to push innovations. It's from my colleague, Max English, Vice President Global Sales. And Max is our visionary global networker and sparringspartner for innovative laboratory and education projects. So Max, I'm so happy that you're taking us to a trip around the globe. Impulse number three, it's about how can we rethink old-fashioned structures. It's from Dario Tonelli, Managing Director, Lab Planning, Tonelli in Switzerland. And Dario is a continuous innovator in planning methods, efficiency processes, and laboratory solutions. He founded his company in 2004 and is focused on lab facilities in the field of industry, research, medicine, and education. Some people just say to him, he's the Michelangelo of lab planning. So Dario, I'm so excited that you are part of our event and I'm looking forward to your presentation. At the end, we have a short Q&A session. So if you have questions, write it in the chat so that we can answer them. And then I would say, let's start. Have a good cup of coffee. Let's look to the places where the magic happens. And Simon, it's up to you.
Okay, thank you, Alexander. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm happy to talk about the new Henkel Inspiration Center in Düsseldorf. So as Alexander said, for the last 10 years, I've been working in Henkel in research facility management, looking at infrastructure and processes to ensure their efficiency. 6 years of that I spent in Dublin, and the last 4 years I've been in Düsseldorf. Today, I want to talk about the new building, the new Inspiration Center we have built, and particularly how we have used the shared spaces in the building to promote collaboration. Very quickly, a background on the Inspiration Center. This is a new 130 million euro project that Henkel have done to provide an inspiring environment to bring our customers and our teams together. We see it as very important that our product development and application engineering teams have close contact with the customers, because that way you know what the customers want and you can help bring them solutions. And this building in Düsseldorf will be one of our key tools for bringing our staff and our customers together. Within this building, we have 4 key mission objectives. One is around the customer experience. One is the work environment for the staff and the customers who arrive here. The key thing then is collaboration and also digitalization tools to help collaboration and also to help drive efficiency in the building. Today, I'm mostly really going to be talking about the work environment and how that can promote collaboration. Okay, so therefore my title today is Promoting Collaboration Through Shared Spaces. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through some of the aspects of the building, explain the features and why we came to these solutions. The starting point for this is the new ways of working. So historically, people had an office if they were lucky enough, and they had a meeting table and a phone, and they might have had a desk, and they spent a lot of the time in the office, but perhaps they didn't meet a lot of people and they reduced the collaboration. Alternatively, people were in big open plan offices where they had no privacy and it was noisy and they couldn't concentrate on working. So what Henkel has developed, or in collaboration, I'm sure, with other people, is these new ways of working where we have different modules that people do different types of work throughout the day. So obviously there is still a need for a workstation where people can do, write emails, write reports, etc. But a lot of your day is actually spent in meeting rooms, or perhaps you need to have a small group where you can concentrate and focus on something. Obviously, phone calls can be disturbing for everyone. So if you're having a long phone call, it's better to go into a phone booth. We also in our building are moving away from assigning space in labs to people. So instead, we are assigning lab space to equipment, and then the people move to the equipment when they need to do those activities. This also then encourages more sharing of equipment. So we have shared labs. And then finally, you have the more softer spaces where people can do different activities, such as project spaces for different types of work with people, and informal areas, coffee, etc. And the point of this is that people move to the space that they need when they need to do a certain activity, rather than doing all the activities in one same place. This is more efficient space-wise. It encourages more ad hoc interactions, more collaboration. And also from a health point of view, it's very important to be moving throughout the day as it has shown to have health benefits. So that's the driving behind the new ways of working. But then the key three parts of it are proximity, which is bringing people closer together. The privacy that sometimes you need for either concentrated work or for confidential conversations. And what is called permission, which is kind of a cultural change where people see that it's okay to sit in the coffee area for the afternoon, drinking coffee and working on your laptop, or it's okay to go and go into a phone booth if you need a quiet conversation. So it's about the cultural change where people see that they can use the different spaces in the different ways they need. So seeing how we applied this in the ICD project, I don't know how many of you have ever been in Henkel in Düsseldorf. The site is huge. There's, I think, 12,000 people working on the site now. When I first moved to Düsseldorf, I still don't have a car. And I used to walk from the red triangle in the bottom of the map there up to meet people at the top of the campus. And it's a 30-minute walk. So you can imagine if you have a group where half the group is in the north of the campus and the other half is down in the south, it's very hard for them to meet. And this was one of the drivers behind the project, was to bring the 450 scientists and engineers in Düsseldorf from 17 different buildings into this one 47,000 square meter inspiration center. So obviously, all of us in the one building together increases significantly the number of interactions. Within this building, then we moved away from, again, the historical small labs with one person in the lab all day, not interacting with other people. So we have these large 400 square meter labs where we have maybe up to 20 people working them with shared equipment. So again, you're suddenly getting a lot more interactions, ad hoc interactions. Teams can form around certain activities. Team forming is much easier because everyone's in the same space anyway. It's easier for them to move. And we can also then start leveraging shared equipment. And this is both for efficiency. It enables us to better invest in better equipment, but also it means now you can start developing local experts. So again, you're increasing the knowledge and the utilization of that equipment. So what we did then, we have 450 scientists and engineers. They all have very different, we have a broad range of technologies in Henkel, so they have quite different needs. So how did we then implement this in reality in the building? So what we did is we reviewed all their activities and realized that about half of what they did was quite common. So in each of these large labs, as you can see on the left, we installed standardized furniture, with fume hoods, with benches, with standard services. And this gives us the flexibility that no matter who moved into each lab, there will be the correct services to supply their needs for the standard benchtop, fume hood type activities. But then the other half of the lab we left free, and we actually customized it then depending on who was moving in. So the example I've shown below is where there's a large, what's it called? It's called an edge bender. It's a large machine for applying coatings to pieces of wood, such as you might have for your flat pack kitchen. So this is what they do. This is an application engineering lab. So now they can bring in large pieces of equipment to put in their lab, and they can demonstrate what they're doing on the day-to-day basis. In other labs, we've had slightly less exciting. We maybe put more benches in depending on what they were doing, but this gave us the flexibility. We then also implemented open offices. There is actually not one single personal office in the building. So no matter how senior you are, you're sitting out in the open office along with everyone else. And what we did was we grouped 2 labs together and had a shared office between them, and we call this a neighborhood. And again, this increases the number of people up to 30 now who are sharing an office, and again, encouraging these ad hoc interactions, supporting team forming, etc. We have then also moved to unassigned seating, which has been a big cultural change. But again, this encourages organic team formation, and the new ways of working are people come together, work on a project for 6 months, and then they split off again and form a different team. By having unassigned seating, this really encourages and supports this activity. And then, as mentioned earlier, in the new ways of working, we have all these different modules in these offices. We have project spaces, we have phone boxes, we have focus rooms, meeting rooms. So again, this encourages and promotes people to move around during the day. Apologize for the quality of this image. This is just to show you the building, I guess, to show you how the building is this triangular shaped with the labs around the outside. And this is just again to show you again how we were encouraging collaboration and these interactions by the way we allocate space in the building. So rather than allocating labs by business units, which again is getting people looking in, we are doing it by technology or chemistry. So all of our labs are multi-business unit, multifunctional, and therefore people again are meeting new people that they haven't met before, but also any idea we get in a particular chemistry or technology, we can now share with all our business units. Additionally, one of the big problems in multi-story buildings is getting people to integrate vertically. People are happy enough to move from one lab to the other on the same floor, but getting people to go up and down stairs can be a problem. So to encourage this vertical interaction or integration, we actually stacked our technologies above each other. So rather than having a floor for one particular technology, we have the technology over 2 or 3 floors. And again, this encourages people to meet, to move up and down the building to meet with their colleagues in the same technology. And it also has the advantage then that on an individual floor, people are mixing with people of different technologies. And maybe some bright idea will come from a different technology group that they never would have met without this particular space allocation. So we think this is going to be very successful. The other thing we did to encourage vertical integration is all our labs, actually the walkways face into the atrium. So when you walk around the atrium on any floor, you can see people on different floors. And again, this will encourage you to meet with people that you might not normally meet with. You can see in the right-hand picture, we actually have coffee points at the top of that spiral stairs. So again, this is a great meeting point for people to meet and to talk. Okay, a lot of the time they talk about non-work related things, but they will also talk about work related things. And this is a generator of new ideas. And you can see in the right-hand picture, we also have these steps, again, for people to meet on the atrium. In the atrium on the first floor, there's a staff cafe. So at lunchtime, certainly those steps are very busy with people after lunch, grabbing a coffee, talking to some colleagues, generating new ideas. We also then have a space in the left-hand picture where you can see we have the space then for temporary exhibitions on particular mega trends or initiatives that Henkel are pushing. So again, you can grab a coffee and you can walk around and see what are Henkel's main innovation trends going forward. And again, this integrates you with the company, and maybe you'll come up with some idea and you can then collaborate and share this idea. We also have information screens on the elevators, again, to inform people of what's going on in the building and to inspire them. So that's around proximity and bringing people together. However, we also need to give people privacy for when they need to do concentrated work, or just if they're the more introverted types, which apparently a lot of scientists are, then they sometimes need quiet space. So within these large offices, we have used things like planting and storage units to break up the space into smaller kind of hubs. And we've also used the project spaces again to break up the larger rooms into smaller rooms. So when you're actually sitting in one of these offices, you can actually feel that it's not too big an office, but at the same time, it's very easy for you to get up and move around and meet your colleagues. We also then obviously have in each of our offices, we have meeting and focus rooms, again, for people to either have one-to-one meetings or to do concentrated work, and also then phone boxes for when the phone calls become longer and you don't want to disrupt your colleagues. In the atrium, then, we have a number of these retreat spaces. So on the left-hand picture, you'll see these high-back sofas, which are very popular. During the project, we did a pilot office to try out a lot of different ideas. That was one of the big winners. Everyone loved these high-back sofas, so we've introduced a lot of them around the building, again, for people to sit down and have a quiet chat, or maybe just to do a bit of quiet work on their own. And similarly, on the atrium, if you're walking around the atrium walkways and you bump into someone and you start a conversation, we have these touchdowns places with chairs and tables where you can then sit down and continue the conversation if it becomes a bit longer. And this way, we're giving people the privacy to have some private or quiet time. Okay, so that's around the privacy. The third thing I was talking about was this cultural change. So like I said, previously, everyone was used to small labs, individual offices, meeting a small number of people. So this was a big cultural change for the organization. So we implemented a very intensive change management process over the last 3 years. For this, we engaged both with the senior managers to explain to them these new ways of working, how this was going to affect their business and how they could drive this change through their organization. But we also then had a bottom-up approach where we nominated what we call change agents, and these were meant to be lab technicians or lab chemists who are at the bottom of the organization, who were going to see the big change, but also perhaps a good networks within the organization. So if we could convince them of what these changes meant, that they would spread this news, and therefore this would bring everyone along on the change management journey. And I just included one graph on the right just to show you. So over the 12 months from December 2018 to September 2019, we met, I think, every 2 months with these change agents, and we would start off each meeting with asking them about their general feeling about the project. And as you can see, the early grey lines, there was maybe 40% people were somewhere between concerned and neutral about the project. But by September 2019, we now had over 60% were in between neutral and excited. So I think that is a good graphical representation of how this change management process, which took a lot of time and resources, made a big impact on how people feel about the building and how people now work in the building, because they knew what was happening and they were able to get ready and prepare themselves for it. This is not an end, this is not a destination, this is a journey. So we have to continue the journey in the new building. So we have new structures in place with a leadership team, again, to deal with the new ways of working, but also the new challenges that come out of working in a building with over 450 people. We are continuing to train people on the new processes in the building. So that's particularly around the digitalization, but also again, in a big building, we have some centralized logistics services. We have slightly different ways of doing things. So we are continuing to train people. And we also then have an exciting program of inspirational events that we are planning to hold. This atrium can hold over 1,000 people. So we can, in theory, have a meeting with the whole building in one go to inspire them with technology talks or with other aspects of Henkel information or training. Unfortunately, obviously with COVID at the moment, we haven't been able to hold them. So at some stage when the COVID restrictions are lifted, we hope then to really start these inspirational events to inspire the people in the building. I'm just going to finish then. This is Henkel's value statement, that we are pioneers at the heart for the good of generations, because I think it really sums up very much how the Inspiration Centre project has gone. We are the first lab building in Henkel to have gone for the new ways of workings, with the bigger labs, with the shared spaces, the shared equipment. So we are pioneers. I think this building is going to be around for the next 40 or 50 years. So it is going to be here for the good of generations. So that's why I wanted to finish on that point. I think this project really has shown Henkel's values and in this project. So then just to finish with a few more pictures of the building and to say thank you for your attention and your time. And I don't know, are we taking questions now or are we going to take questions at the end?
Thanks a lot for your impulse, Simon. And you said to me you have to leave us at 1 p.m. on time. Is that right? So directly a question to you. With all this structural and cultural changes, how did COVID affect this project?
Well, I think we were lucky that from a construction point of view, we weren't too badly affected by COVID. So there certainly was maybe somewhere between 6 and 12 month delay in general on the project because of COVID. That wasn't too bad. Early on, when people moved in, the flexible workstations and the unassigned seating actually was a big benefit because now we could cope with the COVID restrictions quite easily. However, now as the building is about 80% full, we're finding that the restrictions are now causing some space concerns and space constraints. So we are now looking at new solutions and new options to deal with that. But overall, flexible unassigned seating and new ways of working has been a big advantage.
Okay, thanks a lot, Simon. Then I would say I will directly hand over to Max. And Max, it's your turn.
Thank you, Alex. Hi, everybody. Let me just share my screen. Good intro, Simon. Great example of a modern innovation center and what we see around the world as one of the global trends. Those innovation centers are shaping the scientific world, and I think it's a great example of Henkel's first new generation lab building. I understand there's a big one going up in Shanghai, or a refurb happening in Shanghai as we speak. So quite excited to see what you do with that one. Now, in our first session back in September, we touched on a few lab trends, global lab trends, and I think they're quite relevant when we speak about the innovation centers. And just as a recap, let me go back into. So we spoke about the big topics in labs, and obviously you mentioned a few buzzwords and you incorporated them in your lab. Obviously, we have a paradigm shift in working away from the box lab, the single lab for the single researcher or for a research group, to hybrid versions, to collaborative science across business units, which I think is a great example of that you mentioned. But also that I guess you want to create a nice place, a nice lab for your researchers, knowing that there's always a war for talent, there's a war for the right people, and they have a choice to go to other companies. So creating a lab, a nice lab that can be adapted to change, that allows for collaboration and communication is one of those mega trends that we see. Another of those mega trends would be the topic of sustainability, which is also very often a major factor when organizations, or be it private or governmental, build new scientific buildings. Clearly, sustainability plays a role. People look at the socio-economic impact, the total cost of ownership, and very often those buildings are in the middle of a city or in the middle of a existing campus, so you can't just pollute the air or use all the resources. So that's clearly a factor we see as well from a global trend point of view. I won't speak so much about the digital part of it and the trend towards digital labs or more automated labs, because that's a trend, I guess, across all lab categories, not so much only for the high-tech innovation centers, but surely a major trend we see big topic number 4, as we called it, is that innovation ecosystem, being part of a wider ecosystem, not just having a scientific building somewhere, maybe on the outside of the city, but being where the magic happens, maybe as part of a university campus. Incubators and shared facilities are a major trend we see worldwide, and surely something we call global innovation centers, which is why we speak about those today. I've brought a few examples from around the world. I think they're quite cool and quite relevant to show and showcase some of those other facilities that there are being built or were built in the past, with a few nice pictures and some deep dive into those references. And the first one I'd like to look at is the Biomedicum lab building in Stockholm, part of the Karolinska Institute. Some of you might know the Karolinska Institute. It's basically the university or the medical university behind the Nobel Prize for Medicine and Physiology. Right, so this institute kind of selects the Nobel Prize winners, and it's a very, very cool building. Not just as a lab building, but as a building as a whole. It's in Stockholm. It's very nicely built. I think 2018 was when they moved in, and you can see in here, it's basically 4 buildings, 4 towers, if you like, grouped around a central atrium. You can look down the atrium here. It's I think 11 floors and totally around 65,000 square meters. So quite a massive building. And again, here as well, the focus was on collaboration. That's why there is a central atrium. And you'll see later on some of the floor plans that there's also a central way in, one way in. So all the user groups have to come in, and you'll surely have those people mingling, whether they work in block A, B, C, or D. But there is those interchange and interface with various groups. Beautiful architecture. If we look at the some key facts, it provides space for up to 1,500 researchers, so very big. 26 lab spaces, neighborhoods, and as quite a mix of open labs. Again, the idea is sharing equipment, especially since they have quite a lot of expensive equipment. The intention was to have that as a shared facility and shared equipment, so it's not down to one research group only being able to use it. It's really, you can book it, you can use the equipment, and by that, mix with people and foster science. We then have looking inside the labs, very adaptive. You see flexible lab spaces, flexible in the sense that nothing's fixed to the floor. You can see it's like a ceiling supplied lab structure with cantilever cabinets, so they can be moved. There might be a piece of equipment that goes in, but also nothing's really fixed to the floor but the structure of the bench, so the supply is from the top. So if you had to remove some of those benches for flexibility, that would work. I spoke about those lab quarters or lab neighborhoods. They have around 1,000 square meters each, and you have 55 scientists in that neighborhood. Again, they collaborate in user groups, and that's that very, I guess, prominent feature that we see today, where you go away from smaller lab units with a principal investigator, over to bigger lab categories, which is here defined as around 50 to 60 scientists. Some of those units then have special containment facilities within the very unit, so that you don't have to always go out to a central shared facility, because some of them, it might not make sense depending on what you work on. There are shared facilities. There's an imaging center in the basement, but general, I guess, containment facilities are often part of the lab unit. We then have some sustainability factors. I mentioned that earlier. There is obviously Sweden gets cold in winter, so there's specialty window and glazing involved. And there's also a centralized system for facility management, so that you make sure that you have a central waste treatment rather than individual units, centralized heating, and centralized air treatment, to make sure that overall there is a efficient use of the resources. If you then go further and look into the layout, obviously the people in this panel are lab specialists. You can see the atrium I mentioned in the middle, and the 4 defined buildings, A, B, C, D, and one entry. You'll see that later on the ground floor. The dark blue areas here, this is all labs. and around the outside is where you would have your write-up areas. So maximizing daylight, having people being able to look outside and and enjoy some of the views, but then go back into their lab. And you can see from a stacking point of view, interesting floors 7 and 6 are all the way through cell culture focused. But then across the rest, it's quite a scattered focus. I mentioned the imaging, so there's one core imaging in the basement, and then the top is used as you would above the city as meeting rooms, lunch rooms, breakout areas to make best use of that facility as an eyepiece within Stockholm, but also for the users, the scientists to get a 5-minute break with a coffee and enjoy the views and meet other people. This would be a typical layout. This is actually the first floor layout, ground floor layout. I mentioned the entrance, one central entrance for the 11 floors, 4 towers. So you can imagine it gets quite busy at peak hours. We have the atrium here. We have an auditorium, and I think quite interesting. If you look at one of the lab floors, you can see how the offices are at the perimeter of the building, and then you have those central lab areas that I mentioned earlier. There are a few criticisms from users speaking about change management. There are a few, I guess, valid points. For example, having the offices outside along the windows also makes the labs inside less visible. They're quite blocky and bulky here, heavy labs, so you kind of still create some clusters, if that makes sense. But overall, I think the feedback has been very well received from the users. I think they won some prizes too, architecture prizes. So yeah, a great example of a really cool innovation center. The second one I'd like to show and share some facts with, because I think it matches quite well that trend of those innovation centers, is the Allen Institute for Brain Science. It's in Seattle, Washington, in the US. It's a very cool building. You can see here at the bottom, they reused an old car dealership from the 1920s, made sure they didn't destroy that, and then built basically a new headquarter with various facilities scattered around the city, moved into one, and you can see the concept was, or the vision was, to combine big science, team science, and open science, meaning, again, break down barriers between user groups, break down barriers between the different stages of science, and really create open labs, open offices, and quite interestingly also, you will see that later, mimic or biophilic design, mimicking a petal of a flower. What I like about the lab, it is a LEED Gold lab, and as we all know, those categories, the LEED especially, are very hard to achieve with lab buildings, obviously being not the most energy efficient buildings in the world. At the Allen Institute, for example, heat is reused, or heat generated in the server rooms or by the autoclave is reused to heat other parts of the building. I think that's a pretty cool method. And you can see here the view from one of the labs into again, there's a central atrium. And one of the main features we see in lots of labs these days, I saw a very cool spiral stair in the Henkel building in Düsseldorf. Stairs are very often one of the major focal points within those facilities where people then meet, changing floors up and down, like a communication area. And you can see here as well, glazed labs to make sure that there is a certain interaction between people, and you can zoom in and out. And that's my favorite feature here actually, is those cantilever meeting pods, and you'll see on the next slide, basically around the atrium, you'll have on various levels, you have those pods, and I think it's a very, very cool feature, making use of that space, making use of that basically free space, open space, having those breakout areas. You can just walk out, meet a colleague, have a quick coffee or a tea, or sit together with your colleagues. And I think that's a very, very cool architectural feature. Those pods, as well as obviously, as I mentioned earlier, the stairs connecting the floors. Quite a stunning atrium, I find. 6 floors in total, and I wanted to show you the idea with the petal. So basically, the idea was that the 3 different towers would kind of overlap, interact, like a petal of a flower, and you see the those small dots would be those meeting pods, the cantilever meeting pods I spoke about. Quite a neat feature. And basically, if you then look at the layout, how that is mirrored in the actual layout of the building, you see here's the atrium, the center of the flower. Basically, you have your labs, right? This is your lab areas, again glazed and fully integrated into the overall building. Yeah, I think a very elegant innovation center, and one surely features the trends we mentioned earlier. Another cool project I'd like to share is from Germany, and it's the German Center for Neurodegenerative Diseases in Bonn. It's actually 3 buildings, and you can see from a top view, it's 3 individual buildings. This one being the main lab building, as you can see clearly by the amount of cooling units on top, and they're all connected, so they're almost hinged, if you like. It's I think in total 35,000 square meters of building, and again, those hinges are meant to funnel people together. You will see there's on the layouts, there's meeting rooms around. This is where people meet. This is where people bump into each other and again collaborate, have a coffee, generate ideas. It's all about making sure that people actually, meet and not just sit in their office or their lab and do their things and never really get to talk to others. There's a view from the outside. It's also an energy efficient building. It was ranked with the German certification process as a gold building. Again, we all know how hard that is with lab buildings, so a lot of work went into making the facility sustainable. It is a brain research center similar to the Allen Institute, a brain disease research center, and a bit more German design in the inside, I guess, a bit more slick and a bit more very straight edges and not much flowers I can see here, but again, very prominent stairs, very clear architectural language. And let me just look at the next picture, because I think there's a very cool picture to make sure and again demonstrate there are meeting rooms all across the buildings for the 500 researchers that there are. And I mentioned earlier there's 3 buildings, and in the second building, this is the main lab building. So all the labs are housed in the 3rd building. A major feature I like about that center is that really there is a collaboration between the lab and the office. So as you can see here, it's signs on display. That's one of the big trends we see. No more closed doors, no more separate rooms. It is right where in the middle of the building, and also very close to the write-up areas next to the labs. As you can see, it's all glazed, so it's fully visible. You can see from the outside in and from the inside out, which I like. And a very cool feature also is those supply shafts that are I guess a color feature, but also act as a writable wall. So a very cool, I think, design piece. And you will see on the layouts later that there's basically from the end from one to another end, you can see through. It's all glazed, again to maximize that daylight distribution. We can see the buildings, how they kind of act to each other, how they depend on each other. Typical layout of the building. More interesting, I guess, here, the typical lab clusters. As you can see, they're all here in the middle, with the write-up areas right next to it, rather along that outside wall, and then the support buildings next to it. And on 3 floors, you have those hinges, basically, that connect those buildings. If you look further into the labs, and sorry for the bad image, it's from an actual 3D from actual AutoCAD drawing. Then you see all that gray area is the lab area, and if you go closer, then you see basically there's all very straight lines, right, from that write-up area, and think glazing, glass walls, all the way through. There's nothing that breaks that view, nothing that breaks that vision. So you have that complete see-through inside the labs, but also the write-up areas, which I think is a very cool feature. And again, signs on display, making use of the daylight, being energy efficient. I think that's quite an important point to mention here. And I guess if I may summarize that, the findings from Henkel in Germany, but also the projects we look at, basically what we're seeing, and it's confirmed around the world. That's not a unique feature of 1 or 2 or 3 innovation centers. That's really a trend we see in those big scientific buildings. There is a trend towards research across boundaries, away from building blocks, user groups, individual researchers, to collaboration. That is very clear. So buildings have to enable that. There's a trend towards temporary use. There's a trend towards sharing. There's a lot of equipment sharing between the different user groups and scientific institutions, maybe, or business units. So there must be a booking system. There must be a way to share the equipment and maintain that equipment. We see lots of co-working and also remote working today with COVID especially. So the labs have to enable that. So they have to be digitally enabled. Otherwise, that does not work. And obviously, we see lots of project-driven teams rather than just defined by their structure of their business unit. So clearly, those labs we see have to be open. They have to be open access as well. They have to be in a way that people can mix, and group sizes can be bigger or smaller depending on the actual task, on the project, on whatever is being researched. So the infrastructure has to enable that. Also, there has to be shared spaces. There has to be shared equipment, and at the same time, there has to be a method of being able to book it and use it efficiently. And obviously, there also has to be, and there are formal and informal communication zones. I think the second most used word that Simon used was coffee, and I think that's a major feature. This is where the magic happens. The coffee kitchen, the kitchenettes, the breakout areas is where people meet, where they talk, and where problems get shared and solved. So that's what you see, and I think quite well, and what you could see in the projects we illustrated, that those innovation center trends worldwide, they allow for that, and hence we found them very interesting to look at. Now, this is using existing references. The next speaker, obviously with Dario, will speak about a much more abstract topic, how to envision the future. So before I lead over to Dario, I'd like to thank you for being part of that journey. And maybe just as another recap, this is the 5th event of the Waldner Academy. I referenced the first one today. We've had some others with the incubators, for example, as a second session, universities, institutes, and STEM labs. All of those are on YouTube. All of those are being shared. So recorded and shared. So after today's session, within a few days, they will be online. So if you missed one of the older sessions, feel free to go back, because I think it's quite relevant now that we make references to all the projects, and we kind of, have a thread with those projects. And I think so far the feedback has been very, very good, and I'm thankful for everybody's attention today.
Thanks a lot, Max. Now I directly hand over to Dario.
I'm Dario Tonelli, Managing Director of Labcafé Tonelli AG. We are a planning office offering product-neutral lab system solutions, and we are known in the planning world as the crazy ones, the others who always want to do everything differently and occasionally throw the old-fashioned structures overboard. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to my world, a world of the unknown, of challenges and surprises, but also of fascination. I'm here today because I was asked by Waldner to do a presentation, this in advance. As you can already hear, I am Swiss, and we Swiss have a strange habit. We cannot say no. Rather we say yes, and even more often, yes, but. Looking back, the yes, but has given me lots of interesting stories, and I'll tell you a few of those today. I am very happy to be here, and I welcome you to today's topic of the short lecture. How can you rethink old-fashioned structures? At the end, you will recognize a recipe for your success. The next 20 minutes will focus on 3 essential aspects. First, old-fashioned structures. Why are they so important? Second, what role does Labcafé Tonelli AG play in this transformation process, and why are we successful at it? Third, what does the future look like, and above all, where does the future take place? As mentioned at the beginning, we are the crazy ones, but what makes us so different? Perhaps the answer is contradictory. We are different because we value the old-fashioned structures. And that brings me to my first point of the presentation. Why are old-fashioned structures so important? Let's take a trip around the world. Welcome to France. Everyone recognizes it immediately. The Eiffel Tower. Is it an old-fashioned structure? I would say no. It was built in 1889 for the World Exhibition. Without doubt, it is one of the most timeless landmarks in Paris and inspires architects all over the world working on the latest high-tech projects. Let's look further towards Egypt. The pyramids, a World Heritage Site since 1979. But the shape of the pyramids, an old-fashioned structure? We at Tonelli would say no. This geometrical form is simply timeless. It is effectively a universal structure which is not negotiable based on natural laws. And because of its timeless structure, it is a symbol of eternal life, the perfect place for the tombs of the pharaohs. Form and content fit together perfectly. Do you agree? Welcome to Switzerland. Our pyramids are made of chocolate and end up timeless on your hips. If you eat too many triangles, you become strangely round. This is known as the Toblerone paradox. Seriously, our Swiss Toblerone has a classic design structure with real recognition value. In this case, one in the length extended pyramid. It is a structure that shouldn't be changed. It would cause an uproar in Switzerland. After this little trip around the world, one thing is clear. We have distinguished clearly between old-fashioned structures and timeless structures. That is the key point. Rethinking doesn't mean destroying. On the contrary, timeless structures should be further developed and improved within the context of their time. Again, to distinguish, old-fashioned structures are passing fashions. Timeless structures are important for our development process. They develop and adapt to our ongoing quality of time, and they have proven themselves. Sometimes it's really difficult to distinguish between old-fashioned and timeless structures. We like to hold on to what has proven its worth over time. But sometimes, however, we need to throw the old structures overboard in order to be able to develop new ones. In lab design, this is called moving and redefining the boundaries. So fear and conservatism are the worst advisors when it comes to long-term decisions and often end up costing the double. In order to develop existing structure further, exactly two factors are required. First, the right people. And second, trust. And to that, lots of time for many discussion is needed so that everybody comes out with the same understanding of the task. The dynamic of the development process is often in direct contrast to the speed of change of the guidelines, which sometimes becomes a stumbling block. This means the guidelines often lie behind the developments. A second important aspect in the change process is trust and commitment from all persons involved. Change cannot be made alone, especially not in Switzerland. It is about harmonic cooperation between researchers who end up working in the building and spending a large part of their lives in it, the management, and above all, the authorities. To ensure that an idea does not remain just a vision, two aspects are of particular importance. A clear proof of operational, functional, and safety-related feasibility. Only this brings the necessary confidence bonus for all parties involved. After all, we know vision is one thing, but safety and trust are crucial. The demands and expectation of what people want to achieve in life differ from person to person. We cannot teach a cow to ski because it's just not her nature. For the development process, however, it is important to have the right people in the team, those who are willing to approach and support the change process together. But The most important thing is that you are always yourself. You have a clear goal in mind and enjoy what you do. In summary, we can say, if work is to be successful, the following points are crucial. We make a difference between old-fashioned and timeless structures. One is replaceable and the other is not negotiable. We make a clear distinction between vision and illusion. We invest a lot of time in human and operate active trust conviction management among all participants. And this brings me to my second point, the transformation process and the role we play in it. We have just seen timeless structure like those in Paris and Egypt are important pillars of our culture. In order to further develop these structures in a sensible way, we Labplaner play a special role in the development process. Effectively, we are, so to say, in the sandwich position. We act as a generalist. That means we mediate, moderate, sense, recognize and create. And sometimes we also provide treatment with chocolate. Our company success story shows that changes and development are enormously important. 18 years ago, we started as a team of 3, but soon it became clear that to build up a company, you need to have the right people, because profit is not the key to success. We quickly noticed that we had different views on the strategic development of the company, so I separated from my 2 partners. It was clear to me from the beginning that I wanted to invest in the company so I could grow. At that time, subjects like innovation and lab of the future were strange to me. I was alone and hardly any experience in lab design. Giving up was not an option, and Toblerone was a big help at that time. So I started with small projects and was able to develop steadily on the new challenges, but also on the topics of innovation and what is meant to be by Lab of the Future. It's like gaming Nintendo. You work your way up from level to level. The projects became bigger, the task more and more complex. I was also curious to know what tools and methods my competitors were using and what I could learn from them. It was clear that I did not ask them directly, no. I had people in the laboratory world who I trusted and who supported me. The answer was always, stay as you are, stay yourself, enjoy what you do. I didn't understand this answer for a long time. 18 years later, I realized that the person I was talking to wanted to tell me that I should continue to do my work with respect, with passion and authenticity, and with real joy. When the client feels this, success comes by itself. Modesty, respect, and trust are the key words. When I noticed that I was gradually gaining a foothold in lab design, I began to invest further in the company and looked for the right people with a focus on character and matching the company spirit. The person's title or their references were mostly secondary for me. The person, the appearance at the interview, that was important. I also wanted to feel how motivated these people were to develop themselves, to promote innovation, and to work in a crazy team to achieve unique things. At the end of the day, it was mostly my gut feeling that decided. The reason for our valuable development was that we were always open to new and unique things. And as I said earlier, we could never say no to project inquiries. Project inquiries where we saw the possibility to change something for the better, to implement new ideas. Exactly these projects made us curious. The network is very important. As the saying goes, a network only harms the ones who doesn't have it. In the end, laboratory planning is all about humans. the human being in the center, the network, the key to success. I know at any time who I can ask. Another important aspect for us is we use emotions to stimulate and to inspire people. We call it the wow effect. Good isn't good enough anymore. It needs to be unique. Working with the team to develop something new and unique for the needs of the client while having fun and developing ourselves in this process is simply the highest feeling you can experience. We enjoy what we do and let this motivation flow over to the client. We are adaptable and transmit empathy and trust in the new. The new makes us curious. It drives us to push boundaries together with the client. In this process of further development, good communication and cooperation with the customer is an absolute requirement. He needs to understand the new in order to gain trust. In summary, we are in a sandwich position between the old and the new. For a transformation to be successful, the basic requirements are needed. First, a clear self-understanding, and second, the right attitude towards the client. For us at Tonelli's, it is important to remain curious and enthusiastic about success. And when interacting with the customer, passion and empathy are essential. Just briefly, the human being is always in the center. The future of the society is also orientated towards them. And this brings me to my third and last point. The question is, how does the future look like from Tonelli's point of view? And what role do we play in this transformation process? Over the last few years, many topics have occupied us, starting with COVID, with all its social consequences, through digitalization, automatization, change of work behavior, fluid lifestyle, etc. These are all subjects that shape our everyday life, and no doubt they will also be part of our future. But before we discuss how the future will look, the question remains, what actually is the future? I think the future is all about change. How and in what direction remains to be seen. An important part of the future is striving for the new, respectively being innovative. My personal experience teaches me you can't be innovative by pressing a button, sitting down at the table and inventing something new. Unfortunately, that's not the case, at least not for me. From my point of view, innovation arises from the unwinding of the task, sometimes even unconsciously. It is a parallel process. This process takes time to think, to analyze, to compare. Often the best ideas come to me while mountain biking. There I can switch off and focus well on such topics. Just before I start to feel terrible, it is not because of the beauty of the Swiss mountains, but because of physical exhaustion. In that moment of physical letting go, that's when I get the best ideas. I think everyone has had their own personal experience here. My creativity booster has 2 wheels, a saddle and a handlebar. But let's be honest, who knows exactly what the future will look like in 10 or 100 years? Of course, I don't know either. I don't even know the lotto numbers for next weekend. And if I knew them, I wouldn't be sitting here now. But let's be serious again. In recent years, we have seen quite clearly, clients have different needs. They have different visions of their future. The task of Tonelli AG is to analyze exactly it is an idea or already a finished vision. It is important to us. First, we have to understand exactly the customer's needs, and only then can we develop an architectural solution together with him. In the end, all these architectural solutions have one thing in common. There are places of science where new knowledge and new products are created. There are places of creativity. Here results are produced that are of great importance for human life. The people working in these places create new values for the society. They spend a lot of time of their lives here. One thing is clear, motivated and happy people perform better. For the single person, it's important to have a good feeling in his working environment. He doesn't have to work here, he may have to work there. Ease and fun are innovation drivers. Also, social aspects are becoming increasingly important in lab design. Important factors nowadays are issues such as well-being, harmony, and collaboration. Here too, we see also in the future, the focus will increasingly be on the human being. Let me give you a couple of examples from my world of lab design. In the competition between pharmaceutical companies for the best researchers, attractive employment conditions are simply no longer enough. So resources are increasingly being invested in new, innovative and attractive research facilities. After all, sustainable and efficient working process improve employee well-being. Old concepts need to be critically evaluated and reinterpreted to remain attractive in the long term for the best researchers. The most important drivers here are keywords such as appearance, point of attraction, well-being, wow effect, collaboration, use of synergies, interdisciplinary, and many more. Let's have a look at the universities. Here, unfortunately, people still think in old patterns. Here, people still think in terms of kingdoms and defend their academic territory. In reality, there is a real fear of change. They are cautious in their approach to do things the pharmaceutical industry has long ago put into practice. They often start very open and innovative and then fall back into old habits. Let's have a look at the seed cell of our future. What is happening in schools these days? The answer is disappointing. Here in Switzerland, science rooms in schools are still from yesterday. There is no real progress to be seen here. The reason? The entire school system provides no direct encouragement to develop teaching methods and didactics for the future. Other countries are much further ahead in this respect. For example, Australia and New Zealand. At the very interesting presentation on the 19th of January, we learned that school buildings and teaching methods definitely need to be developed further. This is the only way to inspire and motivate school children. The teachers of the future should not just be sharing knowledge, but above all, also motivate. It is up to the teachers to inspire the children for the learning process. The right environment would help on this. What do I take away from this? One thing is clear, the future starts at the schools. For us at Tonelli's, it is a great concern to transfer the idea of innovation and its transformation not only to the pharmaceutical industry. Schools and university must also become attractive places to work. Just in this way can we create the basis for further enthusiasm and motivation. Only in this way can we prepare the entire educational sector for the future. After all, the most important thing is that we are constantly evolving because change moves and inspires us. Change motivates and leads us to success. That is the reason why we are gathered here today. With all of our ideas and creativity, we can push the boundaries of lab design and make it more efficient, smarter and safer. I am sure that together we can achieve this goal, and believe me, the world is very interested to know how curious you are. Or simply do as I do. Innovation doesn't take place in the silent chamber. It takes place with the climb on the mountain bike. But seriously, these are all important issues. I would be very interested in your perspective. Please send us an email with your assessment of where the laboratory world will change the most in the future. As a small thank you, you will receive a sweet triangle story from us in the shape of the Toblerone. After all, we know that chocolate contains many substances which make us feel better, and not just on dark days. Most important, it gives us our brain the energy we need to think. I look forward to your questions and suggestions. I would like to thank you for your attention and slowly come to an end and summarize again. Initially, the question was, how can you rethink old-fashioned structures? In the last 20 minutes, we have recognized three things. First, old forms, old structures have their justification. We distinguish between old-fashioned and timeless structures. Timeless structures are not negotiable and are the basis for the future. Second, change and rethinking things cost energy, not just in material terms, but also mentally. Change generates fear and uncertainty. Only together and with mutual understanding can we set the path for our future. Third, innovation does not happen by pressing a button. The benchmark remains the human being in his innovation space. Passion triggers motivation, and motivation is the basis of our future. So, the original question of the lecture, how can you rethink old-fashioned structure, has deserved a clear answer. Yes, we can, and yes, we must rethink old-fashioned structures. So, think human, be human, stay open-minded, and embrace the future. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Dario, and thanks a lot for your extraordinary presentation and your sweet offer. I love Toblerone, and I will send you many ideas to get one. I think everybody feels the passion for your work. Now let's look to the Q&A, to the questions from the auditorium. And there's a question for you, Dario, directly. From your point of view, what are the most important criteria for planning a lab of the future?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I mean, this is also what I experienced. And it's really like playing Nintendo or being in the Champions League. You need at the end the right people and the right team who understands also the vision of the client. And I think it's also that this team or this person has to ask the right question, and also to put the user needs and the human in the center, that at the end, I mean, we are planning the building for the user and not for the architects. And this is sometimes we as a lab planner, we have to compare and also to distinguish also with the architect sometimes.
Okay, thanks a lot. Another question to you, Dario. Where do you see the greatest potential for further development in the planning of laboratory buildings?
I mean, you heard it out of the presentation. It's, I think at the end, it's how can we bring the people together and not like create like kingdoms. And I think this is a very important fact that with promoting transparency and to that give also the user the ability that they can meet and they also exchange can find the place. I think this is very important. So the concepts also of the design, how we do these processes, and also at the end, the combination of the building design and also the interior design. This has to really to be out of one hand. I mean, at the end, it doesn't help us. We have a really beautiful building, and then at the end, we destroy it with the furniture, which we cannot allow and transmit the transparency or where the people can meet. So I think at the end, it's the concepts at all, but also how we design the vision or translate the vision of the client in an architectural solution.
Okay, thanks a lot, Dario. A question to Max, to you. From your, sorry, here, I like the concept of open laboratories. How to deal with shared equipment?
I think that the most important part is here that the equipment has to be maintained properly. So there has to be a central facility management, making sure that the equipment is always properly maintained. There has to be a certain traceability too, right? If user group A uses a piece of equipment and leaves it dirty or uncleaned, then that is a problem for the next group. So there has to be certain SOPs in place. And most importantly, I think there has to be a booking platform. There are great tools out there. There are great options already, but there has to be a platform where you can book the equipment for a certain time slot, for an assigned time slot, depending on what you do, and you make sure that at peak times you don't have a rush, right? You need to incentivize that too. Not everybody can book the same equipment 12 o'clock in the afternoon, or not everybody can have the same freezer and put everything they have inside there, right? There has to be a certain level of understanding if you share, and I think those SOPs are the most important part.
Okay, thanks, Max. Another question to you. Do you see a trend towards more or less lab bench area per scientific?
Okay, I reckon the question, do we see, refers to the amount of square meters of bench space per scientist. I think that is a tough question. What we definitely see is less personalized lab space, right? So you would typically say a scientist has, say, between 25 and 50 square meters in a lab, and then translate that into bench space. But there is a trend towards less personalized space, because obviously if you don't have your own fridge, if you don't have your own autoclave, your own incubators and stirrers and all equipment, because it's shared now in a central facility, that personalized space that a scientist would use becomes less, right? So I guess, yes, individual space less, but shared space more.
Okay, Max, and do you see differences between the industries and the continents in building such innovation center?
No, I think overall they're in the same ballpark. Overall, the space per scientist is very similar. Most architecture firms are global. Most companies are global. So we have whatever we see in Europe. You might find even more futuristic buildings actually in Asia. So obviously I'm based in Singapore, so we see the delivery of a project is typically much faster than in a very conservative geographic, compared Germany, say, for example. So very often trendy ideas are being incorporated while they're still trendy, because a project delivery is much faster. Whereas if you have a multi-stakeholder, typical German or Central European project delivery, then I guess ideas, when they're implemented, they might be already old in some other parts of the world because they are implemented so much faster. But overall, I reckon it's very similar no matter where you go. Okay, thanks a lot. There are so many questions in the chat. I look to the time, and a last question to you, Dario. Did COVID affect your work? Because we all know you are a really collaborative guy in your team, and is there an effect to your work?
I think it's more like the work in the planning modus, or more like it affects the building design. I mean, we were very good prepared for COVID, so we could really switch very fast into online modus. And I think we learned a lot positives out of that I think with this modus we can plan, I think, more efficient. But we have to be careful that the person home at the home office, that they don't get too much isolated. This is one thing that we have to be careful. So sometimes from time to time, overall in the nice warm days, we try to go out in the forest and have like just meeting the people again, and then we go back to COVID. And I think that worked pretty good. And also the discussion in the lab design, of course, it changes also the concepts. And I mean, rather we are talking more like about shared desk, and we would also reduce the office spaces and all that.
Okay, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Dario. Thanks a lot for your great presentation, Dario. Thanks, Max. And Simon was leaving us at 1 p.m. So thanks a lot for everybody. And I hope you enjoyed our meeting and our impulses. Our next event is on the 2nd of March. It's about the new Roche Piret Innovation Center. I think great impulses about that project and cool insights, also from the project manager. And thanks a lot for everybody. See you next time. Thanks. Bye.